Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. Thanks for joining me for another Sunday solo episode. Whether it's Sunday night, you're getting ready for your week, Monday morning, you're on your way to work, or whatever day this podcast has found you, I'm really glad you're here. So this weekend, I was doing some spring cleaning in my place. It feels like spring is actually on the horizon. There's hope. And I was just feeling like kind of getting rid of things and going through things. And as I was looking around and cleaning shelves and everything you do when you're antsy for spring, I noticed how things have changed for me in the last years in terms of the stuff that I have. I just started to really notice like, wow, I've really changed some of my practices in sustainability or in low waste living or whatever it is. And I just wanted to talk about it more. I haven't talked about that much on the podcast and what that journey was kind of like for me, things I've learned. And I came to, there's a lot of things I want to share eventually. But one thing is just the number one thing I wish I would have paid more attention to and listened to or learned, or someone would have like really drilled in my head in the beginning. That is the focus of today's podcast, is the number one secret I wish I would have had starting the low waste journey that I went on a few years ago. I started to learn about how little things get recycled in our country, how much waste we produce, whether it's clothing, electronics, just crap, the packaging that goes into stuff, all of it. When I really started to do a deep dive into this, like I've talked about on the podcast before, with anything, I kind of go all in. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes that is a little overwhelming for me and probably for the people in my life, because I learned about how we have too much garbage in the world, and I was like, well, I have to be zero waste. I can't produce garbage ever again, and I need to do all the things right, and I need to be just like it looks like on Instagram, all of it. And when I reflect on that now that I've got a few years of that consciousness under my belt, the number one thing I wish somebody would have told me, are you all ready? Don't throw away your shit yet. Use what you have. Use what you have. That is it. Use what you have. I know it is a basic lesson, but the greenwashing, which is a whole nother topic for another podcast, of Instagram and from different companies, is that to be low waste, to be ethically living, or to be more sustainably living, whatever jargon you want to use, you have to buy all this shit. Which is really counterintuitive when I say it out loud. Like, oh, I'm going to live with less, so I need to buy a bunch of stuff. Now, some of the things I bought when beginning this journey were really helpful. For example, stainless steel straws. I am really glad I have them. I haven't bought a plastic straw in years and years and years. I use them all the time. However, I have maybe a dozen. Did I need a dozen? No, I probably only need 2 because it's just me. Things like that, where you could either make a purchase and you don't have to make as many, or went through this phase of getting rid of all plastic containers. I was like, oh, I don't use plastic anymore. Plastic's not good for the environment. I need to get rid of this stuff. That's true. Plastic is terrible for the environment. It sits in landfills forever. However, what I wasn't thinking and what I wasn't conscious enough is to use what I have, is to use up that stuff until it absolutely couldn't be used anymore, instead of getting rid of it and getting fancy glass containers, which is such a privilege. Sustainability shouldn't have to be a privilege, but it's made into the privileged idea of having these fancy things so you're Instagram ready and then you're sustainable. But remember the secret. Use what you have. That's another thing, is that the more I actually learn, and when I just kind of started to chill out a little bit, I had a lot of what I needed. Food coming in glass jars, maybe a salsa jar or a peanut butter jar or whatever it is. You can use those glass jars. You don't need to buy 24 mason jars in order to store all your food in glass. You can use that. I have glass jars for everything. I don't even have cups. They're all glass jars or mason jars. You can use them as vases. You can use them to hold your toothbrush in the bathroom. You can use them for leftover food. You can use them for tea. You can use glass jars for everything. That is probably the next rule, is glass jars can be used for everything. Lotion. I'm trying to think. Candles. I've made candles using old small glass jars. I mean, if you go on Pinterest, Pinterest is like the low-waste liver's dream because they have so many ideas for upcycling and recycling and reusing. Look at that first. Look at that and use what you have. The same goes with clothing. I'm not very creative in terms of sewing or upcycling, but if there's ways to do things different or use clothing in a different way, again, Pinterest can really be your best friend here before you get rid of things. I just felt like I had to get rid of all these things that weren't right or weren't perfect or weren't sustainable, and that is not helpful because then I just contributed to landfill anyway. But I did not see that then. I did not make that connection then. I wanted to be perfectly low waste, which there is no such thing. So that already really set myself up for failure. But use what you have. Get creative and make it fun. That's what I loved. If you listen to the interview with Ashley Piper, the author, she talked about how making it exciting, making it fun, making it almost like a game. Like, what can I use this for? What can I not buy and use this for instead? You don't need to buy a humongous thing of Tupperware or glass containers or whatever it is. You probably already have a lot of what you need. Here's another example. You don't need to buy 50 billion microfiber cleaning cloths. You probably have an old t-shirt that you can rip up and use. Especially if you are someone who went to college. I swear going to college just means you automatically get like 50 million t-shirts somehow. Or at least that was my experience. Or if you're involved in causes or something, all of a sudden I just feel like sometimes I'm like, where did these shirts come from? But you can use them for dusting and cleaning and scrubbing and whatever it is. You can reuse them. You can make them into cleaning cloths, and you don't have to spend money on fancy microfiber cloths. You can buy one or two, but you don't have to buy the 100 pack in order to live sustainably. You don't have to buy that much more. There are so many examples of this, but if you are interested in learning about living with less waste and making your carbon footprint on the earth smaller, that is amazing. And I am so glad that you're interested in that. We should all be more interested in that. But before you go hog wild, just kind of look around, see what you can use. For example, I bought a bamboo cutlery silverware set. It's because it's supposed to be travel. It comes in a travel pouch. It's bamboo. It is, honestly, it's very Instagram. Can you tell this was when I was really first on Instagram and diving in and judging myself by it? So I have this bamboo set. It's great. I still use it. I'll use it until I absolutely can't use it anymore. But you know what else I could have done? Used some silverware I already had and also just thrown that in my purse or thrown that in my camping bag. Stuff like that you don't necessarily need. So pause and just think, do I have anything already that I can use for this purpose that I was going to buy something new for? And I'm not saying there are no things that you shouldn't invest in slowly if you can and if you're privileged enough to. This is also a really privileged standpoint, right? To be able to be like, I'm throwing my stuff away and I'm buying new things because I'm sustainable. What a privileged position. Right there, that is just reeking with privilege. Use what you have. Many people have to make those choices in using what you have. And don't worry about looking Instagram ready because that is so far from their mind. It is such a privilege to worry about that. And I see that now. I definitely didn't see that in the beginning. But there are probably so many things laying around your house that you can use. And like I was saying, there are things that you can invest in. Having a really, really, really nice insulated water bottle and or insulated tea coffee mug, those are two things that are really, really amazing. I have a Hydro Flask or Clean Canteen, whatever brand, that I have had since, undergrad. So years and years. It's been to different countries with me. It's so banged up, but it still works. And it was probably like $30 7-8 years ago, and it's still with me. So there are some things that, yeah, you can invest in that. But there are probably a lot more instances where you already have what you need. And if you don't, so let's say you need some new containers. You're like, it's not that I don't want to use what I have, I really just need stuff. So then if that's the case, next step, can you get it secondhand? I am in love with Poshmark. You can find the best things. I just found a new kitchen apron. Yes, I broke down and bought an apron. That's where I'm at in my life. This is 29. But for so cheap on Poshmark, secondhand, it's in great condition. Look on places like that if you are going to buy something and add something to your amount of stuff that you already own. That would be another tip, because when I was starting out on this and I was obsessed with being more sustainable, I was just buying all this new shit. And it's unnecessary. And I'm not judging myself because I was doing my best with the information I had. And if you have done some of these things too, that's okay. You did your best with the information you have. Hopefully, this is a little more information, and then maybe things will be a little different moving forward. So the number one thing I wish I would have known starting out on my sustainable journey is use what you have. You don't need new things most of the time. If you have any sustainable tips or want me to talk more about this stuff, I love this. I don't talk about it as much on the podcast, but I think it would be a fun addition. So if you enjoyed this episode, let me know. Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. If you are enjoying this podcast, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. If you want to help me get this into the ears of more listeners, send it to a friend, text it to a family member, share on social media, and tag me. Whatever you can do really helps me out. If you haven't heard yet, I released my first course. It is the 7-day self-love reset course. It comes to you through email. You can start whenever you sign up. Take a look at consciouslycarly.com. And if you haven't checked out my Patreon, head over to patreon.com/consciouslycarly and see all of the amazing things that are shared over there. Until next time.